This is the Texas Land Guys podcast, hosted by brothers Tim Dosh and Tom Dosh. With their partners David Marshall and Tripp Rich, they have built DMRE, the leading land brokerage in Texas. With decades of experience brokering deals between landowners and real estate developers, they take you inside the deals that move the market.
Welcome to the Texas Land Guys podcast. Tim and Tripp, good to see you guys this morning. How you doing?
Yeah, good to be here.
Thankful to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, this is fun. It's fun to sit down. I thought today we could do a little topic that's a little bit different than just talking about land. We're sitting here already end of the first month of the year, which is crazy. Time really flies.
It is so wild.
Feels like just a few minutes ago we were just talking about the year starting, so it's pretty crazy. But we get to this point in the year, and I was having fun with this on ChatGPT, that 80% of people that set New Year's resolutions have already dropped their new resolutions by this point in the year. So you get about, 1 month in, 12th of the way through the year, and 80% have already really not followed through with the commitment. So we've probably all been there in our journey of setting goals, and whether you still do or have done New Year's resolutions. It's interesting because I think the way that is all structured and set up, it can be pretty hard to follow through, clearly, because the majority of people are not. So interested to kind of talk a little bit about today, not necessarily New Year's resolutions, but more about what the three of us are trying to do and constantly improve. And as leaders, knowing that we have to execute at a high level, and knowing also that we have lives that are a lot more than just being at the office with our families and other priorities that we have, that we would say just have to come, before work. But then when we have a lot of work responsibilities as well, just what some of the things are that we do as leaders. And maybe it's more of a mind shift than it is just trying to say, like, here's how you can do a better job with your New Year's resolutions. So interested to dive into that topic today, and interested in your guys' thoughts.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've talked about before we started recording is, like you said, how many people struggle to go even a month or 2 months, and especially 3 months with whatever their goals are, New Year's resolutions, and the difference between real change and motivation. And I think we can all get super motivated, and we can do something for a short period of time, kind of do a sprint of changing, our habits, or changing our, day-to-day lives and activities, things we're doing. But to see consistent growth and really change over time is really hard. I think a lot of people just stay the same person and just have these brief times of motivation that produces some kind of activity, but no true change. So I think that's what we're talking about. And the idea of changing our identity to shift to more of a healthy place in these different areas versus just trying to change our actions. Because I think it's pretty hard to change actions without changing our identity, the way we see ourselves, the way we interact with people in the world. Sometimes that's the problem, not necessarily the actions that we're taking.
Yeah, and Tripp, you were saying a minute ago that you don't really do New Year's resolutions. So interested in, you said you were going to share why and what you do instead. So interested in your take on all this and what you're trying to always do to set goals, improve, and kind of follow through.
Sure. Yeah. A lot about it, like personally for me, is just trust in the process, and continue to follow that. But ultimately, I think what people don't realize is that 90% of it is just showing up, and showing up, if that's imperfectly, perfectly. I mean, we're not perfect as humans, obviously. And I think showing up's the biggest part. And I used to be so hard on myself, with work, relationship, whatever it is, right? Just being so hard on myself. And I finally realized that it's like, man, just showing up every day is a major win, and continuing to celebrate those wins. I think a big part of it that people forget about is it's like, not every day is going to be perfect. You're not always going to do everything perfectly, but when you show up consistently, you stack wins, and it's all about stacking wins. And that's in every aspect in your life. I think something that if I was going to set a goal that I continue to try and do is just having accountability and focusing on falling in love with discipline. Discipline is the hardest part in every aspect of my life, and I think most people's lives. But I think it sets an example for not only for myself, but like for my future kids, my wife, my employees, my business partners, my friends, people that you interact with, every day. I think sometimes it's easy to forget that it's like, there's a lot of eyes on us at all times. And so when we can set that example, I think it's pretty impactful. So in regards to the kind of goals, I mean, obviously like love to keep learning. We're still learning. I'm 11 years into the business and continuing to learn daily about real estate, constantly trying to read. And then other than that, continue to grow relationships on a more deeper level, and that's with my family, my friends, coworkers, helping people out. And then lastly is probably, exercise and diet. I don't struggle with the exercise really at all. I love being active. I love being outside, especially in Austin. I love going to Colorado, as we all do. But diet's probably the hardest one for me personally. It's so difficult, and it's probably 80% of the work the results, it's 80% is from diet. But like in, the world or the country that we live in, it's all fast now, immediate. So just being disciplined and trying to eat well, eat right.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you talk about showing up, and I was talking to Tim about this the other day. Just most of these goals that people are setting are around health and fitness. It's like 80% of people going into the year, that's the stats, it's the numbers, are health and fitness. And then 80% of people don't follow through on their health and fitness goals after the first month. So it's really hard, and it is discipline for sure. But what I was telling Tim was, I think when it comes to fitness, and I'm sure people will disagree with this, but I think it's just showing up. Like it is showing up to the gym. I think the word I had used was going through the motions. If you are willing to go through the motions, whether that's like, you're rucking, you're walking with a weighted vest, or you're on elliptical, whatever you're doing, but you just do that consistently, you're just getting that activity, that will have positive impact. But you can actually just do it by showing up and doing it and just being like, I'm going to get up and I'm going to do it, or I'm going to do it at lunch, or I'm going to do it before whatever time you choose to do it. There's other parts of life that are obviously more difficult than that. We were talking about relationships. Relationships don't get the same focus, which I think is interesting going into the year. They get a focus, but health and fitness is 100%, 80% of the goals. And I think what's interesting about that is it probably has a little bit to do with what's marketed to and what's sold, and gadgets and equipment and everything. And you need this for next year, and this is going to get you in shape. And here's a diet, or here's a meal plan or whatever. And this will, so it's marketed to a little bit more. But we were talking about how relationships are more difficult because there's another person involved. And with fitness or with nutrition, it's hard, but it's just your own discipline. And then if you can just do it, it actually will have the gain. The challenge with the relationship is it should have the positive impact, but there's still another person involved.
Absolutely.
And so it can be, it doesn't have the exact same direct impact or effect as just working out or nutrition.
Yeah, with fitness, there's like an objective measure typically. If you're really going to be disciplined, eat healthy, and work out, you're going to see changes in your body happen over weeks and months, consistently. Where relationships can take time, and sometimes you don't necessarily see things clearly. Maybe there's some improvement, but there's not consistent improvement. Like you said, it's much harder, and it takes another person to be a part of it and for them to respond. I think in a lot of ways, it's maybe infinitely more valuable, the relationship side. We're all big believers in the physical side, diet and exercise. I'm not trying to minimize that. I think it's very important even for how you are in relationships with people, because you're healthier in those relationships if you're in shape. But sometimes if the only focus is health and the only focus is, achieving, the next physical feat that we're trying to do, whatever that is, it can become very isolating for people, where they're succeeding in the gym or they're succeeding with their body composition, but they're not succeeding in their marriage or as a dad or a mom, or maybe even in friendships or work. And so I think trying to be balanced in that. And then one thing I think you said, Tripp, that is so good is discipline, which we talked about. Consistency is another way to think about that. Showing up is another way to think about that. So many people don't succeed because they just stop doing the thing, whatever that thing is. I think they stop doing it because there's friction and it's hard. And there's a lot of reasons why they don't want to do it one or two times. And so they just get out of the habit, and then they just stop doing it. And Tom and I were talking before about David Goggins, and he's become very popular. And I think we were saying how in a lot of ways he's not very healthy, probably as a person. His approach is so extreme, it's not very healthy for him, because he just goes really hard, and beats his body up. But I think he's become so popular because as a culture, we've gone so much the other way, where we're so comfortable and everything's so convenient. and we don't want to do anything hard. We don't want to take any risk at all. And we're trying to just be so safe, and everything in our life is atrophying. Relationships are atrophying. People are lonely. Physically, people are in worse shape they've ever been in. Mental health is the worst it's ever been. And so people are drawn to this idea of like, I can go do hard things. And that's why he's become so popular. And I think that there is a benefit to that when you're wanting to do hard things, it actually can help you. You can make great leaps forward in your life, but it's hard to do hard things. And that's the thing that I think we struggle to do consistently.
Yeah, Trey and I were talking about this the other day, just in the importance in life, especially in our business, but the importance of outside your comfort zone. Like, you have to. And that holds so many people back in the business, especially starting out, is just realizing that just because you see us doing things or, just walking into a meeting, and you were telling me, Tripp, last time about a meeting you were in where you didn't know that you're going to be like, you got invited to this meeting, you know, you're going to walk into like 30 investors, like presentation format, like auditorium, like you thought you're just going to, a couple people that wanted your opinion on the market. And, we love that. We do thrive off that, but that's also uncomfortable too, to like in the moment get thrown into that and be like, time to perform, but after a while you've done it enough, you get comfortable, and then there's like another level to it. But I think it is really important, if you just seek out comfort or what you think you're good at and you don't challenge yourself, then it's really going to hold you back.
I was just having this conversation with one of our analysts yesterday in the year in review. He was saying that it's like, it's hard and he's uncomfortable, and, he struggles with confidence, just because it's hard when you're getting on the phone and starting in the business, as and you're working a lot and you're not seeing immediate results, and just trying to like re-engage him and reinforce. And, I explained to him, I said, man, like, if you're not uncomfortable, then you're not growing.
Yeah.
It's like we constantly need to be, and obviously, like, I love all of my comforts in my life. I like having a nice bed. Like, you don't have to go extreme, but at the same time, it's like, it applies to like, business, personally, financially. It's like, when you're uncomfortable, it's how you change. It's how you grow. If it's not challenging, then you're not going to change, and I think it's so easy to get stuck in that comfort zone. And like, especially in our business, if you want to survive and be successful, it's like, you're going to have to be uncomfortable for quite some time.
Well, I think,
I just told him, I said, hey, get used to being uncomfortable. And then it becomes a lot of fun. It's like,
learning through failure is really important.
It's probably the most important. Yeah.
So important. I mean, I think that is something where we fear failure so much, but that also holds us back. And being able to, like, one of the top reasons why people quit their New Year's resolutions is it's all or nothing. And so it's like, my goal is every week I'll do X, and then they miss 1 week. And they're like, well, I missed my New Year's resolution, so I'm just going to stop doing it completely. And it's like, learn from the failure. Like, part of discipline is you aren't going to be perfect. You just said this earlier, Tripp, like, show up, you won't be perfect. Okay, so you didn't show up one day. Don't like throwing the towel on that,
I think it goes back to something I didn't say earlier in the opener that I meant to bring up is, I was talking about relationships with other people, but a major part of that is like the relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
Being able to accept failure and being able to know that we're not perfect and continuing to show up instead of getting so down or beating yourself up. It's like, hey man, you got this. You had a bad day, you got bad sleep, or you missed it. Whatever it is, but it's like, you got to keep going. You got to keep going and have that relationship with yourself and love yourself enough, to know that it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to miss something. It's not the mentality. You don't want to make it a habit, but the only way that you can succeed is by building really strong habits. And part of that, a big piece of that is starting that relationship with yourself.
Well, I think that what you're talking about is really important, because so many people they're so concerned about being wrong, making a mistake, that there's this really, really unhealthy motivation that drives successful people. It's like a performance and it's never enough. So whether that's like, you could have greed and it's money, and money is never enough, or you could have performance and performance is never enough. And I think what you're saying that's so important is like understanding the way that God sees us and the way that he loves us, and really coming into a right understanding of who God is when we understand that we are in and of ourselves not God, and broken people that make mistakes and not perfect. And if we understand that, then we can also forgive ourselves when we make a mistake because we understand that. And instead, the opposite is, I'm so defeated. If you were to call me out or tell me that I did something wrong, or if I made a mistake, I'm so defeated. It's kind of like my world's over. But it's a lot
Yeah.
healthier to be able to understand, like, I'm not trying to make mistakes, but it's going to happen, and then just learn from them. And the cool thing about knowing God is, and God loves me the whole time. And so I'm okay.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Yep.
I'm okay. And it's not like it's all over and now suddenly he doesn't love me anymore, doesn't care about me. And that enables us to, like you're saying, love ourselves, not from a place of like, just because of me, but because God's behind that, which
Absolutely.
is so encouraging for us. You know, so it's a great point.
Yeah, I listen to Mind Pump a lot, which is a great fitness podcast. And they talk a lot about why people fail with fitness goals. And they say a lot of times the motivation is unhealthy, where someone's like, yeah, I'm 50 pounds overweight, or, you know, whatever their current situation is. They're like, I'm disgusted with myself and I'm ashamed. And I need to just go beat myself up in the gym and starve myself. And they're like, you can only abuse yourself for so long before you can't handle it anymore and you stop. And so the motivation has to be out of, like you're saying, Tom, the right way of the way you see God, that he loves us as our Father, but also like loving yourself. Like, I'm doing this because I want to be healthy. I want to have good energy. I want to have healthy relationships. So if it's physical, it's like, I don't need to go beat myself up. I want to go do something that's going to help my body, you know, grow and change in a healthy direction. I'm going to eat in a way that feeds my body and supports my body and doesn't hurt my body. But sometimes the motivation is actually unhealthy from the beginning. And so it's hard to maintain that when you are actually kind of hurting yourself and then you're not seeing the benefits that you want to see. And just thinking about having a healthy identity and then adding healthy habits to that and thinking about, how do I actually change? Maybe it's in small ways. Maybe it's not like in some huge way where I'm going to completely transform in 3 months or 4 months, but I'm going to take something and add on to who I am. I was talking earlier about in your marriage, you know, there's a lot of ways we can grow our marriage, but maybe like a simple idea is, I'm going to every day tell my wife something specifically I'm thankful for her. You know, maybe something she did or way she helped me or something she said that encouraged me. And I'm going to try and do that for, 30 days, 45 days. I want to make that become a habit that becomes a part of who I am, or I just naturally do it. You know, a skill that I start to learn, because I want to add that on as a long-term part of who I am, not just something I try and do for a while and then I just, it falls off and I stop doing it. And so I think thinking about like, where are the ways I actually want to really change, and then getting really specific about those things and knowing there's going to be some friction. It's going to be hard to keep doing it, but I'm going to persist and keep doing it until it becomes a part of who I am.
I think that's good, Tim. I was thinking about identity too when you said that word, because I think there's the identity of, this is how I want to show up as a person, whether that's like health and fitness, or this is the way that I want to show up as a husband or a father. And the goal, I think, with identity is an identity where they're all connected, because there's a healthy motivation behind the whole thing. Because unfortunately, if your goal is, maybe just I'll take the easy one, make the most money you can possibly make, that could result in just like steamrolling a lot of people, burning a lot of bridges, probably would ultimately, if that's your motivation. And so trying to really think about, how do I align all these different parts of my life into a healthy motivation and identity? And how do I try to put several parts of my life on autopilot, where it's like with my nutrition, and like you said, Tripp, it's hard, especially when you're like around the holidays, that we just came through, where it's like there's so many parties and so many like just good food around that you're not used to always like, well, it's part of the celebration here. We're going to dig in, but you kind of have to be, I think, Tim, you got to tell the story that client was saying about the pizza and the cake. I'll let you share that real quick, because that to me is perfectly what I'm talking about.
Dan Braun, who you guys know well, so his personality. He's a really great guy. He's a retail developer here in Houston, who's been really successful in the NFL market. But he told me one time, there's the dads that have the pizza and the cake at the parties. It's like half the dads, and they're all overweight, and they're all like, getting in on the pizza and the cake. And he's like, then there are the dads that don't eat the pizza and the cake at the parties, who are fit and in shape. And he's like, I was one of the dads who ate the pizza and the cake. And he's like, I finally decided that's not who I am anymore. I'm the dad that doesn't do that. And he ended up losing all this weight and getting in shape. But just talking about the identity change. I think sometimes we think, well, this is who I am. I eat ice cream every night and I watch Netflix and I go to bed late, and it's like changing, letting go of some things that are not helping you, so you can do the things that actually help you. And part of that is an identity of now this is who I am. So these are the actions I'm going to take because of that.
And I think that you guys already said it. It might be painful, probably will put you out of your comfort zone and be hard. Even the simple, like, I'm not going to drink as much or stay up as late, or because those things become like coping mechanisms of it's just easy to veg out, or it's just easy to do this thing. And then when you stop doing it, it's like part of you is gone and you struggle with that. But then after a while, you'll be like, gosh, I feel great. I feel so much better getting sleep. I feel so much more energy. And what I've seen in my life is I have less and less and less kind of desire for me, it would be like sugar. Because I used to love having dessert. I mean, Tim, for you and I growing up, there was not a night that mom didn't make a dessert. It was like ridiculous. That was normal. And I remember our neighbor kids, friends were always like, coming over to our house, because there's always pie and cake and cookies. And it wasn't even just like once a day. It was like cookies in the afternoon and pie for dessert. And I mean, crazy. So that obviously created a love of sugar for us, And so that's been kind of hard to give up, but I feel so much better now, not having the sugar spikes. And especially as you get older and your body just changes. It's one thing if you're a kid and you're like living on your feet running, and it's different, when you are in the office. But I think that those are hard changes, but acknowledging like there's going to be a transition period. It's going to be hard, having grace on yourself, obviously, through that. But then also like, I'm not going to be perfect through it, but there's light at the end of the tunnel, and it's going to be amazing. Like it will be amazing to get to the other side of that.
Yeah, I think we talked about that with alcohol. For me, what was so helpful is getting an Oura ring. I think, Tripp, you have a Whoop, right?
Mm-hmm.
But just just starting to connect like what was already obvious. I just didn't realize it. But if I drink at night, I don't sleep very well, and I don't recover very well even a couple of days later. And you start to connect these things, like you said, Tom, with eating a lot of sugar or something, and then the way you feel, and you realize I really want that glass of wine or I want that dessert. And I'm not saying that you should never have that, but when it becomes a regular part of your life, it detracts from the person you're trying to become. And when you start to connect that with what comes from that, you decide, what, I'd rather not have that so that I can have more energy the next day, or I can be more focused, tomorrow, or I can have a better workout, or whatever it is. So
for you guys, as we're talking about this, because we all have worked through times where we've been more disciplined than not. And Tim, you're a great example for me, being almost a decade older than me. And you going through, like, I remember when you turned 40 and you were like, the 40s is like the hardest decade. There's just so much change, all this stuff. And you're reading all this stuff. I'm giving you a hard time with that, but it's been pretty amazing. I mean, you're halfway through that decade now. And I think just from like a health standpoint and a routine standpoint, I think you're in a way healthier place than you were probably 10 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Which is pretty cool to see that it doesn't have to be. I think there's kind of this belief that like, well, you're going to get older and everything's going to get worse. You won't be as sharp. You'll be less relevant. You'll get out of shape. All these things, not just physical, but like relational, everything. You'll kind of just be less relevant. And I haven't seen that with you at all. So what are some of the things, Tim, that you've tried to do? Because it's not just health and fitness for you. I know it's relational, being a dad, being a husband, your faith, a lot of different things. What are like a couple of things that are important for you as you're trying to grow as a leader in different parts of your life?
I think the big thing I've done that's helped a lot is really just focused on my health, so focused on getting good sleep, which when you try and get good sleep, you have to limit how much alcohol you drink, really having a clean diet. I'm not perfect. I'm not like, real stringent on it, but I have a pretty clean diet. I really try and get enough protein. I think where I want to grow, continue to grow, is being more consistent with workouts, because I tend to go really consistent for 6 to 8 weeks, then I'll have a vacation or something will happen. And then it'll take me a couple of weeks to get back on and be consistent again. And so I think trying to work out even on vacations and not having to do like hard workouts all the time, what I've realized is doing something and staying in it is so valuable. And you don't have to really do that much to stay in shape. So I want to continue I think, for men and women, you can get stronger and be healthier as you age up to a certain point. I think people really don't understand that. I mean, I think you can be in your 50s and be in incredible shape. So I want to continue to, build more muscle, get healthier, work on my diet, work on sleep, work on stress reduction. I'm very careful now with alcohol, which I wasn't at all in the past. And that was definitely a problem for me. Just not being consistent. Part of that was not watching my diet, not watching my drinking, and just kind of getting comfortable. And so being careful with my drinking has helped me to be more consistent, especially in the gym and with sleep. So I think those are key things. Then relationally, really looking at, how do I pursue Kristen? What are the ways I can practically, like I mentioned about the thinking idea, but what are some ideas that I can implement? Maybe it's for a couple of weeks or it's for a couple of months, or I want to, have certain kinds of conversations, or I want to, do certain dates with her or have certain experiences with her, but really putting some time and thought into that, and the same thing with my kids, having some experiences with them, discipling them, in specific ways, but putting the time and thought into that to plan for it and not just kind of letting life happen. Because I think a lot of times for me, it's easy to let life happen and things aren't bad, things are fine. And so I can tend to be complacent with that and thinking like, man, this is my one life, my one opportunity with my marriage, with my, being a dad, with work. How do I make that the best it can be? And where are the ways that I can move the needle and continue to grow? And sometimes they're not huge things. They're just small incremental things that make things just a little bit better.
Yeah, those are good, Tim. I mean, thinking about what you said, Tripp, about like showing up and then the idea of being consistent. Tim's helped me a lot with just things like, when I was 28, went on blood pressure medication, and it was kind of like, well, that's genetic. Like, and so that's how I looked at it, was like, oh, that's genetic. Like, I guess I'm just going to be on blood pressure medication. And Tim was like, no, I think there's like things you could do, that you could work on that. And so I had this mind shift a couple of years ago just from talking to Tim. And so started doing some other things, just natural things like, deciding I was going to focus more on consistent exercising. And then also just like really working on my diet being a much more like nutritional diet, so that my intake of protein, and then just ultimately like really a lot of it came down to just, not that I needed to like lose weight necessarily, but just trimming down a little bit had a pretty significant impact on my blood pressure. And so that's been awesome, like not have to be on any medications, because I think you get on that whole thing where it's just like you're just on medication and you're never going to get off of it unless you make some slight changes. And so that's been huge for me, just being able to do that. So yeah, Tim, you've been a big encouragement there. And then Tripp, I'd love to hear what you do and some of your thoughts on just like, all of us we're leading at a high level every day. That includes both running our offices, running the company, but also like we get put in these, a lot of meetings, a lot of presentations, a lot of like, well, I don't know how you feel this morning, but get up and be ready to perform because you've got a full day. You've got 6 meetings today or whatever it is, and you're going meeting after meeting after meeting. Sometimes it's like your best friend is the client, and sometimes it's like someone's a jerk to you for an hour.
Total wet noodle. Yep, been there. Yeah, it's sad about what you were saying, and I'll answer your question in a second. But it's sad about the society that we live in. It's so I love capitalism. Obviously, I love the United States, but it's so much put the Band-Aid on it with medication. So many doctors will just prescribe you something. It's like, oh yeah, because again, quick, immediate, quick fix, right? I was fortunate enough to be introduced through a close friend and a client to a longevity doctor, Dr. Stephen Conroy at Boost Medical in Austin. I think it was about 6 quarters ago, maybe a little bit longer, but it was like so life-changing. Wish I'd have started doing it, when I was in my early 20s. And he's got a pretty interesting background and story with his father, who like had terminal cancer and had 6 months to live. And he ended up changing his diet and had him start working out, and he ended up living, I think, for another like decade.
Wow.
It's like pretty incredible story. And, I attest a lot of, my change to, seeing Tim go through his experience, it affecting you. I think I was a little bit later, coming around to it, but it's been pretty awesome to work with him. It's opened my eyes up to a lot of things that I never thought about, like you said, going into a hard work day that, if you don't feel like doing it, and it could be, our job can be pretty stressful. Something that I shifted a lot of my focus on because I was so focused on work for so long, like when I started with you guys, I was an analyst, and I think I wore like 8 different hats and had like 12 different jobs, and was just there and was trying to stay late and just work for so many years, and kind of got burned out. And it finally caught up with me. And once I changed my health habits, I finally realized that it's like I have to prioritize correctly. And when I prioritize my health, specifically lifting, I don't miss those, and I don't do it every day, but it's just like getting in movement every day, even if it's going and walking for 30 minutes or an hour, and like when I prioritize those things, my stress levels are completely different. My sleep's completely different. My mood's better. And so even on those bad days, I'll still get up and lift, or I'll still go along, ruck or whatever it is. So I think just prioritizing health in general is where my big shift has been. And that's helped me in every other aspect of my life. But, by far, and I think it's so hard, especially when you're young in the business. You're just thinking like, work. I want to be successful. I want to grow. I want to make money. And like, it's like all those things are great, but it's like you got to start, at the home base and building that foundation, because it's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
And I think focusing on your health makes it a lot more sustainable, at least like while we're on, this earth.
Yeah. I love the idea that we learned in the master's program. All of us have been through that, of you establish a foundation for your life, and they compare it to like a rocket launching. So if you had a platform to launch a rocket off of, the foundation for your life is like your health, your physical fitness has to be part of it. Because if you get taken out there and you're dead, then there goes your life. So like that has to be part of it. So do your relationships. You have to have good relationships. Like none of us make it alone. So that's so important. Intellectual is so important. That's been a huge thing for me that I was going to say was I just love listening to audiobooks, like and podcasts and learning. And a lot of it for me is I really enjoy history. I love learning from history. I love understanding what motivated like Richard the Lionheart, and what motivated Winston Churchill, and like what was it like to be, George Washington at the founding of our country. What were the things he was thinking about, and just what I thought I understood about him, and then reading these like really in-depth books on guys like, U.S. Grant and what he went through being a general in the Civil War, and then trying to, lead our country coming out of that. And so I love challenging myself intellectually to, same thing, like read Napoleon's biography and just like, what was the little guy up to, all those things are so interesting for me. But you set that foundation, relationships, health and fitness, intellectual, spiritual, and then it's like, what's the purpose behind all of it? And so one thing that I've really enjoyed has been a huge purpose for me is my family. And it's, I have 5 kids, and that's been a huge blessing. And just getting to like dream with Jackie, my wife, and think about like, what are we doing all this for? And how can we be a part of a bigger picture of like what God's doing around the world? So it looks different for every person, but like for us, a big part of that's our family. A big part of it has been 100 Times Harvest, our nonprofit, like friends that I've met through that, people we've traveled with, people that Tripp, you and I have traveled with overseas, like super cool experiences, much more purpose driven than just like letting things happen or just kind of whatever, or just saying like, I don't take vacation or I don't do, that type of thing because I just work and all that, I just work. That's all I do, and I have some friends like that they like work all the holidays, and it's just sad because they already are doing well and making money, but I want my life to be about a bigger purpose. And so I think if you can also have that purpose driven mindset, which I think a lot of, especially millennials, want to make a difference, want to have a purpose in their life. I think that's huge, to back all the way up to like getting out of bed in the morning and going for a walk or a ruck or a run or, whatever it is. Having a purpose. A really easy way to think about it would be, I've been this way with working out. You get really motivated if you have something coming up, half marathon, a marathon, a 10K, whatever it would be, a trail run. That gets you motivated to like, I'm going to do it, because there's a goal at the end. So I think having that purpose in our life is so important also, just to motivate us, to make progress in these areas.
Yeah, I think a big thing I always think about is the law of sowing and reaping, and how sobering that is, that everything I do every single day, that there's a consequence. There's fruit of that is either good or bad. And, your point of someone who's only focusing on work, you're planting seeds in your marriage or in your family or in your friendships that aren't healthy, that aren't going to yield anything that's good. And so just trying to think of, every area of my life, whether it's my health, working out, diet, watching that, my marriage, my parenting, work. There's a lot of times where I'm not planting like I should be, and I'm maybe sometimes reaping the fruit of that, in a negative way. And then there's times where I am planting like I should be and gain that fruit. And sometimes the planting part is not the fun part because you're just doing something that it's like, man, I'm just doing this again,
Yeah.
and you're not necessarily getting to see like the outcome of it yet, because maybe the outcome's down the road or you don't know what the outcome's going to be. But I think it is kind of helpful thinking about like, what am I going to do today? What seeds am I going to plant? And there is going to be something that comes from those seeds, and so making sure that I'm actually planting with healthy habits, doing the right thing in these different areas of my life and not being blind to part of my life or maybe, I'm missing out on something I could have if I was paying attention to that.
Yeah, that's good, Tim. I like how practical that is to think about every day, especially just with something like habits and just how hard it can be to, get out of bed to go for a run or a walk and then be like, oh, if I don't do that, then that's probably not positive. But if I do it, it's going to be positive no matter what.
Well, and it's crazy to think about too, because it's so easy to get caught up in the moment, or even the short term, right? It's like I'm never sitting there being like, well, I don't want to go lift, and then the thought on that doesn't immediately go, well, if you don't, when 40 or 30 or 40 years from now, you're going to have less bone density and muscle mass. Like those aren't the thoughts that come in, but like that's the reality. But
Yeah.
so many of these things that we do, so many of the seeds that we plant daily, we could not see those, benefits and results depending on what it is, for a really long time, and I mean, you think about our business even, it's so easy to like get in a lull or in a down market and then stop, especially as a young guy, like, get discouraged and not, making those calls or doing that research, but that's planting seeds too, and these are probably the shortest term ones in our life, but it's like that seed that you planted, you might not see it, produce, or if you do, it's not for 12 to 48 months. It's pretty crazy to think about.
Yeah.
It's just really easy to get caught in the short term, but I think a lot of it, we have to remind ourselves that I always, I try to do daily, but it's like, I definitely take my health for granted, and there's, I see people out there that are, they're missing a limb or like they don't, they can't walk, like all these like basic things that we do every single day. And I try and remind myself that where it's like, man, we're so lucky to have our health. So let's continue to take care of ourselves and go out and go on that walk, with your wife or your dogs or even a friend, I mean, it's pretty sobering for sure.
Yeah. And I think going back to what you guys were saying earlier, you're going to have a lot of times where you reap, what you call it bad fruit, or, you plant bad seeds. And so there's negative outcomes in your life, whether relationally or with work or with your health. And those are the things that we feel like are failures a lot of times. But those are incredible opportunities, to have grace on yourself and say, you know what, I'm going to go back and look at, I wasn't doing this thing that I should have been doing, or I was doing something that wasn't helpful, that was hurting. And now there's this natural outcome that was predictable that happened. So instead of, wallowing in self-pity or being depressed or discouraged, it's like, of course this happened because of what I did or what I didn't do. This is an opportunity to learn from that and say, what do I do differently now? Like, how do I have a different kind of relationship with my wife or with my kids? Or how do I get more discipline with my diet or more discipline with my workout? Those are sometimes the best opportunities, like the blessings in disguise. And we see those things. I think for all three of us, we've had those things happen with our health in particular, where we've had negative outcomes because of our lifestyle and what we were doing. And we had to go back and change our lifestyle to then get positive outcomes. And that learning experience is something I'm super grateful for. I wasn't grateful at the time, but now I'm very grateful looking back.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tim. I like how you said earlier that don't think about like goal setting and New Year's resolutions as like a January 1st thing.
Yeah.
It's a constantly thinking about, what am I doing that's working and what am I doing that's not? It's like the daily habit of, like you're saying, sowing and reaping. And like you said, Tripp, like it's a habit at the end of the day. We're just creating habits every day, but it doesn't have to be this big like annual thing. If it actually, that's never going to beat the more consistent, just daily, like breaking it down daily, and the gains that you can just add on top of another, the wins after win after win, versus it's obviously not working with the big manual way of doing it. It's not working for 80% of people, I guess I should say.
Yeah, I mean, there's no better time than the present. For anybody that's listening out there, it's like, start it now, start it tomorrow. But like, if it's the middle of the year, you're hearing this, at a later date, it's like, I think just starting, that's just like we said, showing up is 90% of it. I think just starting, even if it's just going and walking for 10 minutes a day, I think so many people get scared because they're afraid of failing. They're afraid of not being able to achieve their goal. And a lot of people set these like grand expectations, and it's like, hey, you don't have to run 10 miles a day. You don't have to start there.
Yeah.
It's just starting, and it could be very, very small, simple goals. And then you build on those.
I think another thing that's really important that I'm really bad at, and I'm trying to get better at, is, bringing in an advisor, in the areas of your life where, you're not an expert. And I have a tendency to want to research things and learn a lot about things and try and just do everything myself. And there's a benefit to that because you end up learning a lot. But a lot of times, like we're advisors in our business. And so we see people in the land business, a lot of times it's sellers are trying to do it all by themselves, and they're making all these mistakes because they just don't know any better. And so bringing in an advisor that you can trust, who does it every day and has seen it 1,000 times, and you can say, hey, this is going to really help you. You can go so much faster doing that, having the humility to do that. So whether it's a physical trainer, maybe it's a therapist, maybe it's a pastor, whatever the struggle is, if it's an emotional struggle, if it's a physical struggle, if it's a marriage issue, being willing to bring in some help and some coaching and say, I'm just going to be honest. I'm trying to, achieve this goal or grow in this way, and I'm struggling. And I need someone who is an expert in that to help me, to show me the way for a little bit till I'm able to do it myself. I think that can be really powerful.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tim. Well, guys, this has been a good conversation. I'm sure we could keep going. The three of us can talk for a long time, but I think this has been a really good conversation. And to the point you just made, Tim, kind of connecting this back to what we do for a living. We're passionate about real estate. We love real estate. Our lives are a lot more than just that. But if you're a landowner and you're looking for someone that does this every day and is an expert in the land business in Texas, definitely reach out to us. It's always fun when the three of us are on together because we have really all the major markets in the Texas Triangle represented. And so we want to do this more often, just getting the three of us on. So Tripp, thanks for making the trek out to Dallas to join in person. It's been another great podcast.
Absolutely, man. Thank you guys for having me. Always enjoy it.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. If you have questions about land you own in Texas, send us an email at texaslandguys@dmre.com and follow us on LinkedIn to stay updated.